We are at the Los Lunas Decalogue, also known as the Los Lunas Mystery Stone. This is the stone. This is the mystery. So it is scratched into the patina, and if it looks recent, that's because it is recent. One of the intriguing things about it is that it is allegedly the Decalogues of the Old Testament, the Ten Commandments, written in ancient Hebrew. So, if you have any idea where we are, Los Lunas, you're wondering who is reading and writing ancient Hebrew in New Mexico, and certainly, thousands of years ago or hundreds of years ago, depending on the belief. So, part of the reason this mystery has gained such traction is that in some ways, if it's real, if it's authentic, it might challenge the history of North America, because it would imply that Native Americans are not the original inhabitants, but some sort of ancient Hebrew tribe, which somehow got from Israel thousands of years ago to rural New Mexico, without teleporters, without airplanes. If you look at a map, you can understand why this is dubious. So anyway, there's a couple things going on here. Most scholars believe that it is a version of the Ten Commandments. Others dispute this. Regardless, whoever inscribed this clearly had some knowledge of ancient language. So that much is clear. This isn't random. And so the question becomes, well, who did this and why? So there's a couple theories. Now, this was actually found by a guy named Frank Hibben. Now, Frank Hibben was a fairly prominent archaeologist and anthropologist here in New Mexico. When I went to UNM, his name was on buildings and this and that. He's also known for the Sandy Man Cave, which is a cave on the Sandy Mountains of some disputed origin, shall we say. And Frank Hibben claimed that he was led to this place by an old man who told him that he himself had found this some 20 years earlier, or maybe 50 years earlier, long time earlier. So there's some debate about that, because who was this guy? We don't know. Was it some anonymous prankster? We don't know. There's a couple different theories about how this got here. One of them is that, well, the most obvious mystery mongering theory is that it was people who spoke native ancient Hebrew, which, again, unlikely. Most people these days don't speak ancient Hebrew, but that's sort of the origin of the mystery. Another theory is that it's Mormons. There is a Mormon battalion that actually came through this area. And there's a monument not too far from here, so we know for a fact that Mormons were in this area and in Los Lunas, which is about 20 miles that way. And I in researching a chapter from my upcoming book, Weird New Mexico, which is out in a couple months, check it out, UNM Press. I researched it, and I actually looked into some of the travel journals of the Mormon battalion. And there is some logic behind that, because as it happens, many Mormons did in fact know ancient Hebrew, which sounds weird, but Mormons, say what you will about them, they're quite scholarly. And if you go to Salt Lake City and other places like that, Mormons, they speak different languages because they want to go. They speak fluent Portuguese. They speak fluent in a number of languages, partly because, of course, they want to go proselytize. But there's also a strong history of scholarship among the Mormons. So it is not inconceivable that one or more people in the Mormon battalion who are coming through here might have known ancient Hebrew. Now, why they would have come all this way, out of their way, to carve this and then go back to Los Lunas and then continue their march, is highly questionable. Another theory is that it was a hoax either by Frank Hibben or on Frank Hibben. Again, he's the guy that sort of brought this to light. He wrote about it in journals. I think the first published date record of this is, I'm forgetting the date off the top of my head, but I think it was the 1930s and 40s. So but again, he said that this was brought to his attention decades earlier. So if true, I use the word if true advisedly, that would mean that this was existing back in the late 1800s. So either one theory is Mormons, one theory is that it was actually ancient native Hebrew speakers. Another idea is that Frank Hibben himself carved this in and then said, "Oh wow, look what I found, guys! This is cool. Let me write this up." Because as I mentioned, he was also behind the Sandy Man Cave, which was what's called salted. There were artifacts which were sort of found there, like, oh, look at that, look what we have here. So Hibben's legacy has been slightly tainted, shall we say. It hasn't been proven that he was engaging in fraud, but there's not unfounded reason to think that maybe he was in on it. Another possibility is that one of Hibben's contemporaries or students came here, carved it in, and waited for someone to bring it to his attention, and all of a sudden, like, oh my God, this is crazy. So anyway, that's basically the history of it. If you look at the scrapings, they're fairly recent. By recent, I don't mean last week, but certainly within the last 100 years. There are actually petroglyphs near here. There's several over there. So the irony here is that there are actual genuine ancient glyphs nearby. So it's not entirely unlikely that someone would have known that there are other ones here. People had come here before, and someone just said, hey, let me just sort of add to it, sort of in a graffiti style. So in a nutshell, that is the story of the Los Lunas Mystery Stone. So the inscriptions have been studied, and there is some consensus that it is in fact the Ten Commandments. Now, the fact that the Ten Commandments is interesting. Number one, it removes or obfuscates the author, right? The Ten Commandments is one of the best known writings in the history of the world. If I'd written something in my own language, it might reveal something about me, my diction, my level of education, the words I use, nouns, verbs, whatever else. If you're going to choose a passage that would intentionally obscure who wrote it, you could hardly pick something better than Ten Commandments, right? Anybody with knowledge of that could have written it. So that's one of the interesting aspects of it. The other question is, why would it be the Ten Commandments specifically? So, and that lends some credence to the Mormon theory, right? Because Mormonism, if you read the Book of Mormon, they believe Jesus was a prophet, real person, this and that. So they do believe in the historicity of Jesus, and so that putting the Ten Commandments here would not be out of character for Mormons as it would for Hindus or Muslims, for example. They would be like, yeah, Jesus was a real guy. We don't need to write his Ten Commandments on a piece of stone in the middle of the New Mexico desert. So, yeah, so there is a rose scratch out. So, unfortunately, there has been vandalism. So this has been scratched out, and you can see people leaving their marks here and there. So again, this is public land. We had to get a permit to be here, so we are authorized to be here.
Scratchings look the same
yes.
date as the old stuff.
Right. See, this is one of the ironies is that the more recent scratchings look pretty similar to the original, and by original we mean something
maybe
that was
1800.
Yeah, maybe 100 years ago. Certainly, that doesn't have the aged patina that you see in some of the petroglyphs that we know for a fact are ancient. Part of the reason why the Mormon explanation has some resonance of truth is that if this were actually ancient, this was ancient Hebrew written at the time, that would fall in line with the canon of the Book of Mormon. So it would not be totally outside of it. So it would it wouldn't prove the Book of Mormon is real, but it would definitely be another piece they could point to and say, hey, see, look at this. So again, so when I was looking into it, one thing that struck me, because I actually read the diaries of the Mormon Battalion, because they went from, I think it's like St. Louis to California. They were on a long journey, and I'm reading the diaries of the soldiers, the Mormon soldiers, and they were half dead. I mean, they were eating their cows. They were not in great shape, and so I think that the Mormon explanation is not good for a couple reasons. Number one is I looked at the mileage from here, so they were basically following the river, and it's a serious day's hike from Las Lunas to here. I mean, on foot, basically behind cows and cattle. Yeah, we can drive here in 20 minutes, but it doesn't make sense to me that they would, number one, they would camp in Las Lunas, and then know of this place, have a couple people hike out here when, again, they're low on food anyway, hike to this place, hang around, carve this, go back, and then continue their journey. So just for logistical reasons, I don't think that holds water. My best guess, honestly, is that Frank Hibben either hoaxed this or was hoaxed, but can't prove it. The Decalogue itself isn't directly connected to ancient aliens specifically. The acceptance so far as we're talking about historical revisionism, right? So we have insofar as the ancient aliens hypothesis sort of erases ancient people, right? Ancient Egyptians, they weren't smart enough to build a pyramid. Oh, no. Clearly we had, So there's definitely an element of historical revisionism to it. And as I said, the people who are advocates for this, of this being a genuine ancient inscription, again, part of their agenda is, well, hold on, we need to rethink everything. Like, no, the Native Americans weren't here first. This is clearly an example of ancient Hebrew tribes coming through here, right? The problem is when you talk to actual archaeologists like Kenny Fader, Curly Tepliwa, they're like, there's no record at all of any ancient tribe coming here at all. Like they didn't just teleport here and then vanish, right? There would have to be some sort of provenance. You would expect to see, campsites and records of. I mean, there's nothing. So, like, even on its face, it doesn't make any sense. So part of the problem here is that it's very difficult to date because we can't use carbon dating because there's no carbon in it. Like if there was a piece of firewood or a viga or some sort of plant material, we could test it. But this is scratchings in stone. So it's difficult to date with any certainty. You can get some idea based just on how light the etching is, right? So when you have stone that's exposed to sun, you have these designs. That's basically what the Nazca lines are in Peru. You have the Nazca lines that are basically carved into the desert varnish, and so this is a version of that. So this is it's scratched in. So that's one of the things that make this harder to date. But again, when you compare it to the petroglyphs of that we know for a fact are thousands of years old, these are much lighter.
We should check out one of those petroglyphs.
Much more recent. Yeah, there's one right up there.
Yeah.
But so the believers admit, they say, okay, yes, it's true that these are lighter, but their answer, which is bullshit, is that, well, the reason it's lighter is because later people have come and carved into it for their own. So their explanation is, yes, it looks more recent, but it would look more recent because all the people, once it's got notoriety, they're all coming here carving into it, which doesn't make any sense. I mean, yes, I'm sure some people have made little etchings and engravings. That's not going to make these look like they were made 80 years ago.